Hi everyone. This happened several years ago, and for a long time I stopped talking about it altogether. Not because it didn't matter anymore, because people tend to respond with hindsight instead of empathy. They ask what you should have done without understanding how fear rewires your brain in the moment. But I think people hearing this will understand. So here it is. At the time, I was living in a second-floor apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was a quiet area, the kind of place where neighbors waved politely but kept to themselves. I worked as a medical assistant in a small clinic, and my schedule usually had me home by early evening. That afternoon, I came home just after 5 p.m. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and let it close behind me with a dull click. I tossed my purse on the counter, set my phone beside it, and kicked off my shoes. I didn't bother locking the door, something I'd done countless times before without a second thought. My partner was supposed to be home within the hour away. That habit ended that day. I walked down the hallway toward the bedroom, sorting laundry and half listening to the hum of the traffic outside. I was in the middle of hanging up clothes when I had heard the front door open. I smiled instinctively and called out, "Hey, I'm back here." There was no response. That uneasy feeling, the one you can't quite explain, settled in immediately. I stepped out of the bedroom and into the living room. Someone was standing near the kitchen counter. He wasn't masked. He wasn't holding anything. He was just there. A man that I had never seen before, older than me, watching me silently like I had surprised him. For a brief foolish moment, I wondered if he had the wrong apartment. That thought vanished when he didn't apologize or move. I raised my voice and I told him immediately that he needed to leave. I tried to sound confident, tried to make myself bigger than I felt. He didn't react. Instead, he reached down and picked up my phone, then my wallet, then my keys. One by one, calmly, like he had all the time in the world. That was when panic really took over. The only other way I could contact anyone was my laptop sitting on the desk by the window. I rushed toward it, grabbed it, and ran past him toward the bathroom. I slammed the door shut and locked it just as I heard footsteps behind me. Within seconds, the handle rattled. I ran into the closet, locked that door too, and dropped to the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't open the laptop. I logged into the first messaging app I could think of and sent frantic messages to my partner, begging him to call the police. He replied quickly. He said help was on the way. He said that he was leaving work also. I sat there, knees pulled into my chest, listening. The bathroom door opened. Footsteps moved closer. The closet door shook violently, then stopped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry out. I didn't fight. I was frozen completely. Utterly frozen, convinced that if the door gave way, that would be the end. Now, usually when people hear this part, they often ask why I didn't do more. I don't have a satisfying answer. Fear doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like stillness. The noises moved away. I heard things breaking, cabinets opening, glass shattering. Time stretched and warped until I had no idea how long I'd been there. I messaged my mother. She lived states away. I told her I loved her. I asked her to keep replying even if I couldn't respond right away. I didn't want to be alone. Eventually, the front door opened again, this time followed by shouting. I recognized my partner's voice. Moments later, everything blurred. I remember the intruder being restrained. I remember sitting on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. I remember the police lights through the windows. The officers arrived way later than I expected, though I know fear distorts time. They took the man away, and I got my belongings back. I answered questions mechanically. As one officer was leaving, he told me that I should always lock my door. At the time, it felt like blame. Later, I just understood it was experience speaking. The incident itself lasted less than an hour. The aftermath lasted years. Even after we moved to a quieter town, to a safer building, to a place with only one entrance, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt threatening. Every night felt like I was waiting for something terrible to just happen again. Eventually, I realized that the fear wasn't about where I lived. It was about how helpless I still felt. So I did something uncomfortable. I walked into a self-defense studio and signed up. At first, I stayed quiet. I stood in the back. I avoided attention. But over time, slowly and deliberately, I rebuilt something I thought I'd lost forever. My confidence, control, trust in myself. I've trained for years now. The person I was in that closet still exists, but she no longer defines me. I don't judge her anymore. She survived the only way she knew how, and now I know more. If you've experienced something like this and you still feel haunted by it, I want you to know you're not weak and you're not broken. Healing doesn't look the same for everyone, and there's no timeline for it. Thank you all for listening. If sharing this helps even one person feel less alone, then it was worth it. Stay safe.
When I was 10, my life changed in ways I could never have imagined. My father inherited an old house in remote New South Wales from a distant relative we barely knew. He thought it would be an idyllic place to raise a family, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. Little did he know what awaited us. The house was nestled in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense bushland. It was the perfect picture of tranquility, at least during the day. The house itself had an eerie, antiquated charm, with creaking floorboards and dimly lit hallways that seemed to stretch on forever. My family consisted of my father, my mother, my older sister Lucy, and me. We moved in with excitement and a sense of adventure, unaware of the horrors that would soon unfold. The first few nights were pretty uneventful. My father busied himself with repairs, my mother unpacked, and Lucy and I explored the property. On the fourth night, I had my first encounter. I was in my room, reading a book, when I felt a sudden chill. The room seemed darker than usual, and I had the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I looked up, and there, peering around the corner of the door frame, was a figure. It was barely visible, like a shadow, but I could make out the shape of a head and shoulders. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and the figure remained there for a few agonizing moments before disappearing. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination, despite the creeping fear that settled in my bones. Weeks passed and odd things continued to happen, mostly to me. My toys would be moved around and my bed would occasionally shake in the middle of the night. I told my parents, but they dismissed it as nightmares or childish imagination. One night I woke up to a whispering voice hissing my name. I sat up, drenched in sweat, and saw the same figure from before, now at the foot of my bed. It was closer and clearer. It had no features, just an inky blackness. I screamed and my mother rushed in, and the figure vanished the moment she opened the door, leaving her to comfort me and dismiss it as a bad dream. It wasn't until Lucy had her own experience that my parents began to take things seriously. She came to me one morning, pale and shaken, saying that she'd seen a woman in old-fashioned clothes standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her with hollow eyes. My parents started to believe something was off, but didn't want to admit that something supernatural might be happening. Our situation escalated over the 5 years that we lived there. It started out small, lights flickering, strange noises, and cold drafts, but grew increasingly malicious. 2 experiences stand out vividly in my memory from what I recall. The first happened during our 2nd year. My father had gone into town, leaving the rest of us alone, and it was a stormy night and the house seemed alive with almost its own energy. Lucy and I were in the living room trying to watch TV despite the frequent power flickers, and suddenly, the room went ice cold and the TV turned off entirely. In the next moment, the corner of the room darkened and we both saw it. An unmistakable figure peering out from the shadows, its eyes reflecting the dim light. It slowly moved closer and we could make out the shape of its mouth, twisted into a very cruel smile. Lucy grabbed my hand and we bolted upstairs to my parents' room, locking the door behind us. My mother tried to calm us down, but she too felt the coldness and unease that permeated the house. Another terrifying event occurred in our 4th year. My father had become more open to the idea that something was clearly wrong. He brought in a local priest to bless the house after numerous pleas from my mother, and that night, after the blessing, I was in the kitchen getting a drink of water when I felt a presence behind me. I turned and saw the same figure that had haunted me for years, now clearer than ever. It was a man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, with one side of his face hideously scarred. He stood at the entrance of the kitchen, blocking my exit, and I was paralyzed with fear. He began to move towards me, slowly, deliberately, and every step he took seemed to drain the warmth from the room. I fell to the floor, unable to move, only managing to scream when he was inches away. My father burst in, and the figure vanished, leaving the air thick with dread. The priest's blessing had stirred whatever malevolence resided there. In our final year, things became unbearable. The entire family started hearing voices, footsteps, and seeing the figure, now bolder and more frequent in its appearances. It seemed to thrive on our fear, growing stronger and more aggressive. Doors would slam, objects would fly across the room, and we all felt watched all the time. And we decided enough was enough. One evening, as we packed our things to leave, the activity reached a fever pitch. The house shook, the temperature dropped to freezing, and all of us saw shadows darting around. It seemed the entity didn't want us to go, but we were very resolute in our decision. We moved out the next day, leaving behind that cursed house and never looking back. Later on, we learned that the house had a very dark history. The man who built it in the 1800s was rumored to have gone mad and taken the lives of his family. His spirit, along with others, was said to haunt the property, reliving their final moments in a twisted loop of torment. Living in that house changed us all. We never spoke of it much after we left, but the memories lingered. And even now, years later, sometimes I wake up in the dead of night, half expecting to see a face peering around the corner, watching.
I'm a tech sales guy from Portland, Oregon, and I'm on the road a lot, driving between different towns. This night was supposed to be totally standard. I was heading back from a client meeting up in the hills outside the city, and figured I'd take the scenic route, which could actually shave off 10 minutes. The fog started rolling in at around 8 or 9. Before long, it got so thick that my high beams were completely useless, and all I could see was this huge white wall in front of my car. I had to drop down to 20 miles an hour, but I still couldn't make out the damn road. If it wasn't enough, my GPS cut out totally as well. I kept driving anyway, thinking maybe I'd reach a safe location, but when the road started looking weird, with turns I didn't recognize and no mile markers or signs, I pulled over. I checked my phone. I only had 1 bar and 0 data. I tried calling my girlfriend, but it wouldn't go through. Google Maps was a bust too. I sat there for maybe half an hour, waiting for a car or anything to drive by. Finally, I had to pee super bad. So I got out and went into the woods a little way off the road. I found a tree and started going. All of a sudden, I heard digging, with metal hitting dirt in a rhythm close by. I zipped up and moved toward the sound. Through the fog, I saw a man, maybe 40 yards away, digging a pit that was deep and already waist level. Next to the hole was a sack that was big and heavy looking, with dark stains on the fabric. My blood went cold. I ducked behind a cluster of trees and watched. The guy scrambled out of the hole and headed straight for the sack. He grunted while he hauled it to the edge. The sack dropped into the pit with a wet thud, and dark liquid started oozing out. The guy stood there for a second, staring into the hole, wiping his hands with his jeans. Suddenly, he stiffened and slowly turned his head to stare right where I was hiding. I instantly dropped flat onto the ground behind a bush and held my breath. I could hear slow footsteps coming toward me through the leaves and the fog. He stopped some 10 feet away from me. I could hear him breathing hard. My heart was pounding so loud I was scared he would hear it too. "I know someone's watching me," he grumbled, scanning the surroundings. I covered my mouth and prayed he wouldn't see me. A few minutes passed by, and when he didn't find anything, he retreated towards the hole. I waited another 5 minutes, trying to hear his movements. He was back to digging, covering up the hole. So, I slowly backed away, crawling through the bushes. I didn't stand up until I couldn't hear the digging anymore. Then, I totally booked it back towards my car. I burst through the fog, ignoring the branches scraping my face. I was only a couple of feet away from my door handle when my eyes caught the figure sitting in the back. My whole body froze. Slowly, the rear window hummed down, revealing a blood-covered hand gripping a long, serrated hunting knife. "Going somewhere?" he asked, opening the door. He strolled out like he had all the time in the world. He started humming a tune as he dragged the knife right down the side of my car door. Suddenly, he looked over, grinned at me, and bolted. I screamed and ran around the car. I yanked the driver's door open, jumped in, and hit the locks with all of them clicking shut. He slammed into the door and tried the handle. He pounded on the window with his face pressed against the glass. I fumbled for my keys, but my hands were shaking so bad I dropped them. The man then jumped onto the hood, raised the knife, and brought it down on the windshield. My whole body started trembling as a spiderweb spread across the glass. He did it again and again. The windshield was fracturing and about to give. Somehow, my instincts kicked in. I picked them up and got them in the ignition. I slammed the car into drive and hit the gas. The man fell and rolled off the hood onto the road. I saw him in the rearview mirror getting up, covered in dirt and blood, still holding that knife. I drove as fast as I could through the fog. It didn't matter if I knew where I was going. I only wanted to be away from him. Eventually, I found a main road, then another. Soon, familiar streets appeared. It took me 2 hours to get home. I was shaking the whole time and kept checking the rearview mirror to make sure he wasn't following. I called the police from my apartment and told them everything. They took my statement and asked for the location. I couldn't tell them. I didn't know where I'd been or the road name. I could only tell them it was somewhere in the hills. They searched and sent units to comb the hill roads, but found nothing. My car had the knife marks, the cracked windshield, and blood smears on the back door handle, so they knew something had happened. But without a location, they couldn't do much. The case went nowhere. No missing person reports matched the time frame, and no bodies were found. I'm 27 now and still in Portland. I have moved to a new apartment and got a new car, but I try to avoid driving at night, especially not in the hills and fog, because I know he's still out there, maybe burying more bodies, including people who stumble onto it. And I know if I ever saw him again, I wouldn't be as lucky and may even end up in one of those sacks he had buried. When I was a junior, there was a senior named Tyler Brennan, who was also the lacrosse captain. I'd been crushing on him for 2 years, and my friends kept saying he was definitely into me. I believed them. That Saturday, there was a huge party at a house near Whatcom Falls Park, right on the edge of town. Tyler was supposed to be there. But my parents wouldn't let me go out, so I climbed out my window at midnight and snuck out. By the time I arrived, the house was packed and the music was thumping loudly. I saw Tyler by the pavement, laughing at something his friend had said. I spent the next hour working up the courage to say hi to him. He was nice and offered me a drink. We talked for 5 minutes before his friend called him over. "Hey, I'll be right back," he said. After half an hour had passed and he still hadn't returned, I started looking for him. Someone told me they saw him go upstairs, so I went up and found him in a bedroom, making out with Jessica Martinez, one of the popular girls. They were so lost in each other that they didn't even notice me. It felt like my heart was being ripped open. I walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. I was crying, feeling stupid for ever believing someone like Tyler would be interested in me. I kept walking, heedless of the turns I was taking. When I finally looked up, I was in Whatcom Falls Park. The park was dark and empty. Fog had rolled in so thick that everything looked like a dream or a nightmare. The pain in my chest was still intense. Without thinking, I walked deeper into the fog, following the paths with no one else around. After about 15 minutes, I realized how reckless I was being. I was alone at night in a deserted park. I looked around and felt chills down my spine. Slightly shaky, I pulled out my phone and called my brother Mason. He was home from college for the weekend and answered on the second ring. Delaney? It's 1 a.m. Where are you?
The Whatcom Falls. Can you come get me?
I said through hiccups. Jesus. Stay put. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I sat down on a bench near the main path and waited. The fog was getting thicker, and I could barely see 5 feet ahead. All of a sudden, I heard leaves crunching behind the bench.
Mason?
I stood up, turned around, and gasped. A man was crouched behind the bench, staring at me. I could hardly make out his face, but as he slowly stood up, I could see his twinkling eyes. He flashed his teeth, making a slurping sound. Hey there, he sang, chuckling. I backed up.
I'm waiting for someone.
That's okay. I can wait with you. He stepped closer. I could see his face now. It was wrinkly and so hollow. I could count his bones. What's a pretty young thing like you doing out here all alone?
I'm not alone. My brother is coming. He'll be here any second.
The man chuckled. Sure he is. What's your name, sweetie? Ignoring him, I started walking toward the exit, fast. Come on, don't be rude. I'm just being friendly. He followed. How old are you? You look young. 16? 17? I didn't answer and walked faster. The fog was thick, and I could barely see the path. You shouldn't be out here all alone, you know. Where do you live? My heart was racing. I could hear him behind me, could sense he was close. But when I glanced back, he disappeared into the fog, only to reappear right next to me. I screamed and jumped away. He laughed and vanished back into the fog. This is fun. His voice came from somewhere and everywhere at once. You're fun. I ran flat out toward where I thought the exit was. The fog made everything confusing, and I got turned around and lost. I saw the gate, the park entrance, and a relief flooded through me. The man stepped in front of it, blocking my way. He wasn't smiling anymore. Where are you going? He moved closer. We were just starting to get to know each other. I backed up and hit a tree. Sweat glistened on my palms as he kept coming closer.
Please leave me alone.
He stopped inches from me and leaned in close. I could smell cigarettes. His eyes were dark and empty. If I kill you right now, he whispered, no one would even know. You'd just disappear. Another missing girl. Happens all the time. I couldn't breathe or move. Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I was shaking. Delaney! Suddenly, Mason called out from outside the gate. The man's head snapped toward the sound. Delaney, where are you? My brother appeared through the fog. He was 20 years old and built from playing college football. The man looked at him, then back at me. He grinned and started backing up. We'll pick this up next time, he whispered before he turned and disappeared into the fog. Delaney! Mason saw me and ran over. Are you okay? What happened? I collapsed and started sobbing. I couldn't talk and just held on to him while everything came out. Mason called the police. and they searched the park, but found nothing. They took my statement with a description of the man, what he said, and what he did. They added it to their files and told me to be careful. I'm starting college this year, far from Bellingham and that park, but I still think about that night and how close I came, about what would have happened if Mason had been 5 minutes later, or if I hadn't called him, or if the man had decided not to wait. How many girls did it probably happen to, and how many didn't have a big brother to save them? College in Madison, Wisconsin. I lived in the freshman dorms my first year, then got a university-owned housing apartment with my roommate, Marcus, for my sophomore year. Marcus was quiet and kept to himself mostly. He was a computer science major who spent a lot of time online. We were just two guys splitting rent. One night, I was messing around on my laptop and going down internet rabbit holes. I clicked through some dark web forums and found this website, which looked like a cooking blog. It had a black background and a fancy font. The header said exclusive recipes, with photos of plated dishes that looked gourmet and had a professional presentation. I started reading the recipes. The first few seemed normal, until I noticed the protein listings. Instead of chicken or beef, it cited meat, with specific preparation notes. For younger subjects, marinate 12 to 24 hours. The texture is more tender. For mature subjects, slow cooking is recommended. The more I read, the more I felt my knees tremble. Female subjects, ages 20 to 30, yield the most flavorful cuts. Male subjects require additional tenderizing. For subjects under 18, seasoning should be minimal to preserve natural sweetness. It was detailed and clinical, with instructions on butchering, which body parts had the best texture, how to remove bones, cooking temperatures, and plating suggestions. This was a site with cannibal recipes. Marcus walked in and dropped his backpack. "Yo, what you looking at?" "Dude, check this out. It's so cracked up." I turned my laptop toward him. He leaned over and started reading. His face went pale in seconds. Jesus Christ. Right? It's gotta be fake though. Maybe someone created this just to spook people. Marcus didn't say anything. He kept reading and scrolling through recipes, and his expression turned weird, as if he were in a trance. "Marcus?" He blinked. "Yeah, that's disturbing. I'm gonna go to bed. Night." He went to his room and closed the door. I closed the laptop, feeling gross, and tried to forget about it. Over the next few days, Marcus changed. He'd always been quiet, but now he was distant and distracted. I'd catch him staring at people on campus. When I asked if he was okay, he'd snap out of it and say he was fine. The following week, multiple girls filed formal complaints against Marcus. This girl, Emma, from our building, reported to the campus security that Marcus had been following her everywhere she went. They gave him a warning and told him to stay away from her. But it didn't stop. Another girl named Sophia said Marcus had cornered her in the laundry room and asked how much she weighed and if she had any diseases. When she tried to leave, he blocked the door and kept asking questions. The college board got involved and called Marcus in and threatened suspension if he didn't stop harassing women. I confronted him. "Dude, what the hell? Why are you being creepy?" "I'm not. I'm just curious." He went to his room and locked the door. A week later, there was a frat party. I went, but Marcus said he was staying home. I didn't bother him. I got back at around 2 a.m., tipsy and tired. My key wouldn't work because the door was locked from inside with the deadbolt. I knocked. "Marcus, open up!" He didn't answer. I knocked louder and put my ear to the door. My whole body just seized up. Muffled crying was coming through, followed by a scream of a woman that got cut short. My blood went cold and my heart started hammering. I pounded on the door with both fists. "Marcus, what's going on?" He wouldn't answer. So I ran downstairs and found a security guard doing rounds. I told him someone was in my apartment and was screaming. He followed me up and knocked. When nobody answered, he radioed for backup, and another guard showed up with keys. They opened the door. The living room was empty, and Marcus's bedroom door was closed. They knocked. When he didn't open, they broke it down. A girl was in the corner, tied up with extension cords and duct tape over her mouth. Her face was bruised, and she was crying. I recognized her. It was Sophia, the girl from the laundry room. Security untied her and called the police. She was shaking and could barely talk. She said Marcus had grabbed her outside the library and dragged her to our apartment, where he tied her up and hit her when she struggled. "Where is he?" the guard asked.
He left. Said he'd be back after getting supplies.
The police arrived with more questions, and Sophia was taken to the hospital. We waited until Marcus showed up. He was carrying shopping bags from the hardware and grocery store. When he saw the cops, the security guards, and everyone standing outside our apartment, his face went white as a sheet, and he bolted. The police chased him and caught him 3 blocks away. When they searched the bags, they found a meat cleaver, heavy-duty plastic sheeting, industrial cleaning supplies, zip ties, spices, marinade ingredients, and fresh vegetables. During questioning, Marcus admitted that the website had triggered an obsession in him. He wanted to know what human meat tasted like. He'd been planning it for weeks. Stalking the girls was part of the process. Sophia was his target. He'd planned to butcher her and cook her meat that night while I was at the party. If I hadn't come home early, and if I hadn't heard her scream, he would have done it. Marcus is in prison now, with a 25-year minimum. Sophia's in therapy, and I moved out of the apartment the next day. I can't even look at the building. I've graduated and live in Chicago now, but I still think about that website to try to figure out my role in the whole mess. If I hadn't shown it to him, would any of it ever have happened? It makes me wonder how many other people made the same mistake I did. How many have found that site, and how many others got the same ideas Marcus did. How many of them actually followed through and were really successful?
I was traveling with some friends on some 4x4 trails in southern Idaho. We were camping out one night, singing music around a campfire for quite a while, and my friends decided to go to bed eventually. My ex and I stayed up a little bit longer, hanging out around the fire and just enjoying the atmosphere. Then suddenly, everything just got dead silent, like the world got put on mute. I'm no stranger to this phenomenon. It generally happens when there's a predator nearby, and being in bear country, I had my bear spray on me, so I wasn't too worried. My ex and I continued to enjoy the fire though until we heard someone way off in the distance say honey 3 times. You could tell it was far away, but it also had the sound of a whisper rather than a yell, an almost questioning tone, like it was a woman calling out for her husband. My friend peeked out of his rooftop tent and asked if we were the ones calling out, but we weren't. The weirdest thing though is that it just didn't sound right. More so something that sounds like a woman calling out honey, but not actually a human woman. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but the more rational side of us decided that it may have been a hiker or something. The moon was full, so the idea of a couple hiking at night, especially since we weren't too far from the nearest town, wasn't too unlikely, I guess. My friend and his girlfriend, they decided to rejoin us for a little bit, and they also commented on the lack of wildlife sounds. We sat for a few more minutes before, again, hearing that honey sound. My friend agreed that it didn't sound right at all. He called out hello just in case there was some poor lost woman somewhere, but nothing responded. A few minutes later, we heard the same call, but from the complete opposite direction. With how far it sounded, there is just no way some lost hiker could have circled all the way around our camp that quickly. We lit up our floodlights, and we quickly booked it out of the area and ended up cutting our overland trip very short. I still have no idea who or what made those noises, and it really still creeps me the heck out. Honestly, too, I'm really not sure if I'll be traveling to southern Idaho.
This happened when I was 18 and had just moved to a new bigger city about a 30-minute drive from the small town I grew up in. I moved into my first apartment in what I thought was a decent neighborhood and lived there without incident for 6 months, with my boyfriend at the time. Things began sour between us, and since my boyfriend had recently lost his job, it was decided I would be the one to take over the lease and he would move out. It was sticky and unpleasant, but after some time of him dragging his feet, I was finally free of him. I had a friend from work move in to help me with rent since it was a 2-bedroom and all was well for a while. One weekend during January, I had been going out late, and I went to see a musical in a nearby town, so I got home shortly after midnight, kicked off my shoes, and settled down with a bowl in front of the living room TV to unwind. My roommate was out of town all weekend, visiting my family, so I had the place to myself and didn't bother being quiet about it. I was still wearing my dress and tights, completely relaxing, when I heard a knock at my door a couple feet to my left. I glanced at the clock, which almost read 1 a.m., and I thought, who the heck is knocking at my door this late? My front door had half a window covered by blinds, but it was very obvious I was home, as the TV was only a foot or so past the door. My spider senses began to tingle, but I was young, naive, and from a small town where things are pretty safe. I never thought that what was about to happen would ever happen to me. I peeked out between the blinds without opening the door and flicked on my porch light, which illuminated a young man. He couldn't have been more than 25, slight build, honestly looking pretty harmless. Background, I'm like 5'2" and around 110 pounds, female. I'm pretty scrappy, so I looked at this dude and sized him up. I actually thought to myself, I could probably take him if I needed to. Before hollering through the door, yes? He launched into a story talking fast about how he just got into a car accident in front of my house. His young daughter was hurt and his phone had been slung in the wreck. It was lost, and could he please use my phone to call an ambulance? My heart was immediately in my throat. A hurt child? This man needed my help, but something felt wrong. I told him I'd call 911 for him, and he said, that would be fine, but could he please use my phone to call the child's mother to explain they were going to the ER? This seemed reasonable to me in my young naive brain, but I was still wary. Against my better judgment, trust me, after this, someone could be on fire on my front doorstep and I wouldn't open the door for them after this lesson learned. I cracked the door open and quickly slipped the phone out to him, locking the padlock the moment my hand was clear. I still felt something was wrong, so as he made a call, which I could not hear, I paced my living room floor and grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it down to my side, waiting. Everything in my body was screaming at me that something was wrong, but I couldn't turn away from a hurt child. I just couldn't. I wanted to help. A few moments passed and I seemed to calm a bit, briefly sitting down to wait. I put the kitchen knife down next to me on the sofa. When I heard a knock signaling me that the dude was gone, I got up without thinking and walked to the door, leaving the knife behind. I cracked the door only an inch, just as before, and he went to slip the phone back to me. It was at this moment everything changed. Suddenly, a much larger man stepped from the shadow to the left of my door. I briefly registered he was wearing a ski mask, and my heart jumped to my throat in an instant. He kicked the heavy metal door before I even had a second to react, which, being still ajar, flew into me, knocking me backwards into the ground. Another man came from the other side of the door, all of them rushing forward in my apartment. I'm not sure if there were 3 or 4 total, but suddenly 3 large masked men were looming over me as I lay stunned on my apartment floor. They stood between me and the exit and began to circle me, causing rings. My mind registered that they were screaming at me, various things along the lines of, "Give me all your money." The largest of them reached into his brown Carhartt coat and withdrew a gun, which he pointed at me as I lay at their feet, still stunned by the force of the door hitting me and knocking me to the ground. Fight or flight kicked in and my brain screamed at me. Fight for your life. Now before I get an earful, let me say you really don't know how you'll react in a situation until you've been the one staring down the barrel of a gun. Instinct made me do this, and I know it wasn't the smartest thing per se, but this is just what happened. Can't change it now. I recall the men bouncing up and down while they screamed at me. In retrospect, it seems almost comical how they jumped around me. In the heat of the moment, I looked up and decided they'd shoot me if they wanted to, but I was not going down without a fight, and I was not about to let them drag me down the hallway to a bedroom and do know who's what with me either. I looked up at the gun inches from my face and I got angry. I reached out my hand and smacked it away. Luckily I didn't die, then immediately reached out and grabbed the coat of the nearest guy, using it to haul myself to my feet. I was almost up, and I even managed to throw a punch, which moved the ski mask of the one I swung at, barely landing, but affording me a glimpse of his face when one reached out and knocked me back down. Hard, but I wouldn't be stopped. I barely felt the blow, which left me bruised later. Hands flying, I struck out in every way imaginable. I kicked out at them from the self-defense position I'd been taught in the safety class. I was a whirlwind of hair, nails, and fists. Looking up at them, I briefly registered that from the looks on their faces, this robbery and this girl were not going or reacting as anticipated. They were flustered by my apparent lack of fear. They hadn't expected me to not give one flying shit about the gun in my face. I literally smacked it away when they pointed at me. Again, I'm extremely lucky it didn't go off. I know this. My mind became focused enough to register. I need help. I was alone in my apartment, but hopefully they didn't know that. I began to scream at the very top of my lungs. Michael! Over and over I yelled his name at the top of my lungs. Michael was my neighbor, ex-military, a mountain of a man who I knew owned guns and shared a living room wall with my flat. They must have thought I wasn't alone because they panicked and fled out the front door, taking my cell phone and purse as they went, fleeing into the dark night. I ran after them, barefoot in the snow, screaming, "Help! Help!" to no one but the night sky, adrenaline pumping through my veins like fire. Michael emerged at my side carrying a shotgun, dressed only in boots and boxers. I pointed to the tracks in the snow and bless him. He pursued them, coming back a moment later empty-handed. My phone was gone and I tried to call my parents from his, but nobody answered. Michael let me spend the rest of the night on his couch, since I was becoming quickly hysterical now that my adrenaline was ebbing. I called the police. They came and I made a report. News vultures quickly appeared outside my building, and I ended up being the top story on the news the next morning. Although I declined to be on TV, I just wanted to be done. Looking back, I was very lucky. I could have been shot, killed, raped, or whatever they wanted to do with me. Luckily, my insane response startled the shit out of them, and they ran. I'm more street smart now. Carry a taser and pepper spray everywhere I go, and never allow my sympathy for another person to endanger my own life. It sucks I have to think that way, but I'd rather live as a jerk than die a good Samaritan. I moved out shortly after, breaking my lease and citing concerns for personal safety. Had the police report to prove it, and thankfully my landlord understood and let me go. I found a new place and take great care to listen to my instincts when they speak up.
This was around 2001, maybe 2002. I was 17. My best friend Danny lived in one of those apartment complexes where half the units had broken locks on the main gate, and the other half just didn't bother using it. Not dangerous exactly, but not the kind of place you wandered around at night without paying attention. Danny lived there long enough she'd stop paying attention. She called me from the payphone downstairs. She didn't have a landline, which sounds insane now, but back then it was just Tuesday, and told me she'd seen a man outside acting strange, hiding behind things, watching her. Short guy, heavy set, head freshly shaved. Drunk enough that he was swaying, but not so drunk he'd given up on whatever he was doing. She yelled at him, told him she could see him. He stepped out, acting like he wasn't doing anything weird. Reached toward her dog Biscuit like he was trying to test whether the dog was friendly, and eventually wandered off between the buildings. Danny didn't think much of it after that. She was like that. Something could scare her, and she'd shake it off in 10 minutes and be annoyed at herself for reacting. She went back upstairs. Her front door was open. She told me about it later in pieces, the way you tell a story when you're still figuring out what it means. She said she stood there in the doorway for a second just staring at it. The door had a latch that didn't catch right. You had to hold the handle and wait a beat before letting go, or it swung back open. She always did it without thinking. It was just muscle memory at that point. Whoever had opened the door hadn't known about the latch. She went in anyway. I don't know why. I probably would have too. Biscuit didn't meet her at the door. That was the first thing that got her. Biscuit was a medium-sized mutt, brown and white, built like a loaf of bread on stilts, and was incapable of not reacting when someone came home. You could hear him skidding on the hardwood from the hallway outside, but that night he was just running around in circles. Tight, frantic circles around the living room, and then he went into the kitchen and crawled under the table and wouldn't come out. Danny left, went back downstairs, and waited for my boyfriend Marcus and me to show up. We didn't believe her. I feel bad about it now. We laughed a little. Marcus did a quick walkthrough, flipped on a few lights, checked the closets, came back out shrugging. Biscuit had calmed down a bit by then, or at least he stopped the circles. We figured she'd spooked herself. Danny had a gift for that. She could turn a creaky staircase into a whole situation. So we went to Marcus's place across the lot to hang out, and that's when we realized nobody had any rolling papers. Danny said she had some in her bathroom. She wouldn't go get them. I'm talking flat out refused. Arms crossed, jaw set, not moving. She said she didn't care. She wasn't going back in there. We teased her for another few minutes, and then I said fine, I'd go. Because I wanted the night to start, and we were wasting time. I walked across the parking lot alone. I pushed the door open and called for Biscuit out of habit. He didn't come. I looked over and he was back under the kitchen table, same position, trembling. And the thing that made my stomach shift, he was staring down the hallway. Not at me, past me, fixed on something I couldn't see from where I was standing. I left the front door open behind me. I don't know if I decided to do that or if it just happened. I turned on the lights as I went. Bathroom, Danny's sister's room, the hallway light, normal check. Nothing felt wrong exactly. Just off. Then I got to the master bedroom. I pushed the door open and reached around for the switch. The light came on. And I saw him. He was under the bed. Just there. On his side. Face toward me. Hands folded under his cheek like he was settled in for the night. His head was shaved. Same as Danny had described. For a second, and I mean a real second, not a long one, I thought it was something else. A bag. A bundle of something. My brain tried to make it into anything other than what it was. Then his face resolved, and I understood what I was looking at. I stepped back. I didn't run. I just stepped back. One step, and pulled the door most of the way shut. Not all the way because I didn't want the click to wake him. And then I walked backward down the hallway. Slow. Watching the door the whole time. Every floorboard I hit sounded like a gunshot to me. I made it to the front door, stepped outside, stood there. Nothing happened. No sound. No footsteps. No door swinging open. I started thinking maybe it was laundry. Maybe I scared myself. Danny had been wound up about it all night, and I'd let it get into my head. I didn't want to go back across the lot and tell everyone there was a man under her bed, and then have Marcus go in and pull out a duffel bag. So I went back in. I picked up the kitchen knife on the way, not from planning, just from instinct. I went down the hallway again, slower this time, stopped outside the door, listened, looked at the gap underneath for shadows, for movement. Nothing. I opened it. He was still there, same position, still asleep, or unconscious, or something close to it. I cannot explain what it felt like to stand in that doorway and look at him. There was something about the stillness of it, the way he just arranged himself, like he belonged there, like he'd been there before and knew exactly where to go. I left. I ran. Marcus called the police and they got there within 10 minutes. 2 officers went in and came back out with them. The guy half conscious and grinning like it was all a misunderstanding. He tried to greet me like we knew each other, casual, unbothered. He told them he thought it was his apartment. Wrong door, wrong unit. The whole thing. Just a drunk guy who made a mistake. They took him in for the night, no charges. The door hadn't been forced and nothing had been taken. I've thought about that explanation a lot over the years, and I don't know. Maybe. People do stupid things when they're drunk. I've seen it. But here's what I can't get past. If you stumbled into the wrong apartment by accident, if you were drunk and confused and just wanted to sleep, why would you go into the bedroom? Why would you get under the bed? Why not the couch? I've never come up with a good answer for that. Maybe there is one. Maybe I'm reading into it because of how frightened I was. And fear makes everything feel more deliberate than it was. But Danny would have been home alone that night. She would have gone to bed. And he would have been there, in the dark, underneath her, waiting, or sleeping, or somewhere in between. I don't know which one's worse.
This is a true story, not about me, but about my 2 sisters. At the time, they were living together in a rented apartment. The building was actually quite nice, clean, peaceful, and in a quiet part of the city. Everything seemed normal. One sister was job hunting, the other was supposed to be in college that day, but a fever kept her home, and that's when the woman upstairs knocked. It was early afternoon when they heard a soft knock at the door. My elder sister answered it, and felt uneasy the moment she saw the woman standing outside. The woman was old, thin, with hollow cheeks. Her eyes were unreadable, and she stood unnaturally still.
"My daughter's in the hospital,"
she said slowly.
"My phone isn't working. May I use yours to call her?"
She held out a battered old mobile phone, something from another decade. It was clearly dead. Despite her instinct to shut the door, my elder sister hesitated. My younger sister, not sensing the same discomfort, invited the woman in. She sat down quietly, took the phone they handed her, and made a call. Someone answered. A woman's voice crackled through the speaker, soft and weak.
"Hello?"
The old woman began speaking calmly.
"It's me. Are you okay? Are they taking care of you?"
There were replies, faint and slow, but real. A woman's voice, low and distant, but undeniably there. After a few minutes, the old woman ended the call and handed back the phone. Then she looked at them, smiling faintly.
"You should come up to my flat,"
she said.
"There's no one there. My daughter's in the hospital and my husband and son are both at work. I'll make you something nice to eat."
And with that, she turned and started climbing the stairs. Both sisters followed. They didn't know why. Maybe it was politeness, maybe pity, maybe something else entirely. But they found themselves walking up behind her. Then, when they were halfway up the stairs, the older sister suddenly grabbed the younger one's hand. "No," she whispered. "We're not going." They stopped. The spell broke. The old woman, now at the top, said nothing. She entered her flat and quietly closed the door. And as soon as she entered, they heard voices, several men speaking, laughter, movement. But she had said she was alone. The next morning, when the maid came, they asked about the woman upstairs. The maid looked uneasy.
"She has no children," she said. "Her husband died 10 years ago. She lives completely alone."
There was a pause.
"She's known for strange things. People say she does black magic. Stay away from her."
That night, a storm rolled in. Wind slammed against the windows. Lightning lit up the sky. Around 2 a.m., one of the windows burst open. My elder sister got out of bed to close it and happened to glance up toward the apartment above. And there she was. The old woman was standing in her window, watching. In the middle of the storm, at exactly 2 a.m. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stood there, eyes locked on them as the lightning flashed behind her. The curtain was drawn instantly. She never returned, but something stayed. A feeling, a presence, a quiet weight that settled into the apartment, as if she never truly left, as if she was still watching. It happened back in 2023. I was 18 years old at the time, living away from home for my studies in a small town. The place I rented was at the far corner of a small colony. It was a wide area surrounded by walls as a boundary, and the houses were arranged with 4 in each direction, forming a square. The middle area was open and empty, which we used for air drying clothes or sitting around with friends in the evenings who also rented rooms there. About the house, each one had 3 rooms and long porches connecting them. Behind our boundary, there were train tracks, so every time a train went by, it was very noisy, and our house used to shake a little. About my story, it happened at night. As usual, after eating dinner, I went to bed. Not wanting to study and feeling lazy, I used my phone for a while and then went to sleep. At some point, I started to wake up around 1 a.m., and I felt like my friend was sleeping beside me. Then I opened my eyes and looked at her, but she wasn't there. Fully awake now, I looked around for my friend, but I didn't see her anywhere. Then, I don't know why or what I was thinking, I checked under my bed to see if she was there, but she wasn't. I looked around my room. You see, my room wasn't big, it was small, with only my bed, a table, and a wooden Elmira without doors, so I would have seen her if she was there, but she wasn't. Then I thought maybe she went outside to sit with others, because I could hear some of our friends still outside on the porch due to the summer heat. Then I checked my windows and door, but everything was locked from the inside. I started to become really confused, thinking, how did she leave the room without opening the door? How was that possible? Then, dumbfounded, I sat back on my bed and started to think from the time I went to sleep to when I woke up. Then it hit me. There was no one there to begin with. I had gone to bed alone. It was my room. I didn't have a roommate. I felt so dumb. How could I get so confused? But the feeling of someone sleeping beside me was so real. I swear, I felt like we were sharing the same pillow, their head right beside mine. But then I brushed it off, thinking it was because in the past few nights, my sister had visited me and stayed over. After overthinking it for a while, I fell asleep. The next day, I went to my friends, saying good morning to everyone and asking how late they stayed outside. Then I shared my weird experience from the night before, joking that my brain had played a game on me. Then two of them looked at me and one said,
I don't think it's just your brain playing tricks on you. I had the same experience a few nights ago. There was someone sleeping beside me.
She shared that it wasn't her roommate because her roommate was back home at the time. But unlike me, she actually saw someone lying right beside her. She was terrified and didn't want to look at them directly, so she closed her eyes and pulled the covers over herself. I felt scared, and after that experience, I started keeping my Holy Bible beside me and prayed before going to sleep to feel safe and protected. I was so glad it was my first and last experience of something so weird. I hope it never returns again, but sometimes I still wonder what it was. Was it just my brain confusing me, or something entirely paranormal?
The story takes place in a remote area of the UK, but to protect the people involved, I won't say the exact location. My friend Zara, a British Pakistani influencer, had just recently had her second child, and her husband had gone away on a golf holiday, leaving her alone with the two children. She was used to being left alone, as her husband often worked away from home too, and would often go away on vacation with his friends, leaving her alone to take care of the children. It was a stormy October night and there was lots of thunder, so it was pretty noisy. She started to feel uncomfortable as it was getting dark early and her house is fairly isolated. So all the noise from outside was, well, getting to her. At around 9 p.m., she had just finished a cup of coffee in the kitchen. The children were asleep and Zara was making sure the house was locked up for the night. She went back into the kitchen and she saw that the back door was slightly open. She started to approach it, but then felt very dizzy, stumbling, and she fainted. Zara slowly regained consciousness and sat on a chair in the kitchen. The first thing she was aware of was how heavily she was breathing through her nose. She felt something covering her mouth, and after twisting her lips, she realized it was sticky tape that was sealing her lips. Zara started to panic and tried to talk and shout, but the gag around her mouth was preventing this. She struggled to move as well, as she could feel her hands were taped together behind the chair, and when she looked down, she was duct taped to the chair and her feet were taped together as well. Her hard breathing popped the duct tape covering her mouth in and out. Then the lamp over her head switched on. Standing there before her was a medium-built man with a hood on and a scarf covering his lower face. At this point, Zara was obviously petrified and was mainly concerned for her two children sleeping upstairs. The man then said,
"I won't hurt you, but do you keep money in the house?"
Zara mumbled a "no" against the tape. The man had a large bag which he had filled with items such as Dubai jewelry from around the house. The next thing he said sent a chill up Zara's back.
"Don't worry, your kids are still asleep."
He then went to leave through the back kitchen door, and before exiting turned and said,
"I just want you to know I'm sorry for this."
Then he left. Zara struggled for a few minutes, and then eventually freed her mouth from the tape by twisting her mouth and biting on the tape. She immediately ran to check on her children, who had both slept through the entire ordeal. She phoned the police and the man was eventually apprehended later that week. As mentioned, Zara has an online presence, so the man was aware of this and was aware that she was often left alone. He admitted to gaining entry to the back door and drugged her coffee, which explains why she fainted. The burglar said that he had lost his business and was in a desperate situation with the state of the economy, but that he didn't wish to harm anyone. Zara bears a strong resemblance to Kim Kardashian, and the fact that she's a micro-influencer is likely what gave him this idea, as a similar situation happened with Kim Kardashian just a few years earlier. Zara is a very strong, feisty young woman, so she did eventually learn to live with the situation. However, it's not something you can ever fully recover from. She couldn't help but feel sorry for the man who did this, but the feeling she had when she was in that position is something she'll never forget.
I ran a small art studio in Oregon. It wasn't anything special, just a quiet space above a row of shops where I mostly taught kids and beginners. Up until then, nothing unusual had ever happened, at least, not until I got that email. One night, I opened a message from someone asking for private lessons. His name was Evan, a guy in his mid-20s. A few days later, he came in for his first lesson. He told me he was a cook and that he had never really drawn before, so I decided to start him off with some basic exercises. I asked him what he wanted to draw the most. He pulled out his phone, showed me a picture of a woman, and said, "I want to draw myself eating her." The moment he said that, I felt a wave of nausea hit me. Maybe it sounds ridiculous, but it wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. The way he looked at me, his tone, his voice. Something about him made my stomach turn instantly. I didn't know what to say. It was just the two of us in the studio, and I realized right away something was seriously wrong with him. I tried to stay calm and said,
"You're here to actually learn how to draw, right?"
He nodded. "Of course. I need to get my face and her face exactly right, as realistic as possible." That was enough for me. I told him I couldn't teach him and asked him to leave. He looked confused, almost offended, and started arguing with me, but after a while, he finally left. I had a pounding headache, and I ended up closing the studio early that day. A few days later, when I came in, I saw a piece of paper lying in front of the door. I picked it up. There was a drawing on it. It was horrifying. A man was tearing into a woman's foot, eating it. The level of detail was disturbing. Exposed bone, blood, everything rendered with unsettling precision. But what shocked me the most was the face of the man in the drawing. It was him, Evan, and then I felt dizzy, because the woman in the drawing was me. I dropped the paper and screamed. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. He had taken my photo from online and recreated my face perfectly. What made it even worse was how detailed it was. The thought of him spending hours on it, carefully drawing every part, made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but my hands were shaking so badly. And at the same time, I wasn't even sure if this was something he could actually be charged for. Either way, the police came. After hearing what happened, they went to see Evan and gave him a serious warning. Thankfully, he never came back to my studio. But that wasn't the end of it. A few months later, I got an email. Without thinking, I opened it and immediately screamed. There was an image attached. It was a drawing of Evan sitting at a table, eating, and on the table was my head. The detail was unbelievable, like it had been done by someone who studied human anatomy extensively. Every muscle, every layer of skin, every vein, drawn in disturbing precision. And underneath it, there was a message. "This is what I always dream about. When I draw things like this and look at them, I feel the happiest and most alive. Evan." I blocked his email immediately and deleted it, but the damage was already done. That experience stayed with me. I ended up deleting everything about me online and moving my studio. Over time, I managed to get back to a normal life. I still teach art, but even now, I still have nightmares. I tried to understand why he was like that, reading about psychology, looking for some kind of explanation, but I never found a clear answer. The only thing I could come up with was that he had some kind of twisted obsession. In psychiatry, it's called paraphilia. Maybe he had urges he couldn't act on in real life, so he expressed them through his drawings. Sometimes, I wonder if he's still out there, doing the same thing. As for me, I just try not to think about him anymore and live my life in peace. So in the middle of the night, I accidentally heard my mom open the front door, and I heard her say,
"I haven't seen you in a long time. Come in and sit."
My mom kept talking, but the problem was that it sounded like she was speaking to someone in front of her. However, there were moments when my mom went quiet and no one responded. I asked myself, is my mom talking on the phone? But if she were on the phone, I would have only heard her voice. I had clearly heard the door open. So I asked myself again, who is my mom talking to? That night, I woke up and left my room, intending to see who she was talking to. I went out and immediately entered the kitchen, pretending I needed to use the bathroom. I opened the door and saw my mom talking to someone, but I couldn't see who it was because they were hidden behind a wall, so I could only see my mom. The moment I stepped out, I saw my mom deep in conversation, but there was no one visible in the living room. I stood there for a brief second, completely shocked. Then my mom said,
Oh, and this is my daughter. She's grown so much. Go and introduce yourself.
I was confused and terrified. I told my mom I needed to use the bathroom because I really had to pee. Then I ran inside and locked the door. I stayed there for about 5 minutes when I heard my mom say,
All right, see you again.
Followed by the sound of the door closing. When I opened the bathroom door, I saw that my mom had already gone to bed, so I went straight back to my room. A few days later, I asked my mom about that night, about the person she was talking to. My mom looked confused and said,
What are you talking about?
I tried to remind her, but she insisted it never happened. To this day, my mom has no memory of opening the door for anyone.
This happened 17 years ago, so please forgive me if the exact details are a little fuzzy. It was the summer of 1999. I was spending the vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old girl going on 21 and had a severe attitude. I made friends easy with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mom's house. We spent every moment together that summer. We were a group of 4, all of us thinking we were older and smarter than everybody else. Nikki, Katie, Julie, and I were the last generation of home phone lines, playing outside on the trampoline until dark and having sleepovers. We watched VHS tapes and listened to cassette tapes on our Walkman. It was okay to let your children walk around town at night, and we rarely locked the front door. We had no cell phones or internet. My backyard had a concrete wall around it and a gate. Behind the wall was desert as far as the eye could see, just the barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs, and mountains way off in the distance. This town had a major railroad track running straight through it, and there was a major street that had gas stations galore, restaurants, hotels, and attractions. We all received the same warnings from our parents. Stay out of the desert and stay away from the tracks, and don't walk the main strip at night. Do you think we listened? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki, and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks and down the strip to Katie's house. Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Some days we would go to my house to jump on the trampoline. This particular day we got to Katie's house and prepared to stay the weekend because our parents were out of town and we were having a party. The first night the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. We then got down to sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist. You know, the one with Linda Blair. Scary shit, man. I didn't sleep. The second night we told our parents that Katie's mom, we obviously didn't tell our parents we were alone, was going to drive us up to the movies. We all got the money for the movies and then promptly walked down the strip to get junk food at the little store. That's what we called it. Now, I wish I could say that we were aware of our surroundings, but we really weren't. We were absolutely oblivious of the man who followed us all the way back to the house. I feel that I should mention that Katie's parents were loaded. They had a huge property with numerous buildings and broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Their house had a large open kitchen, dining room, and living room. There were no walls, and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors, front and back. The day went just as planned. We got our junk food and made it home safely. We made pizza in the oven, and for some reason one of the girls turned on the TV to the news. As we were eating, we heard a story about staying indoors because there was a report of a sketchy man walking the strip. That's it. We laughed and joked about this dude. Fast forward a few hours, I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, somebody said something that hurt Julie's feelings, and she stormed out of the house. I went after her and opened the front door just in time to see her light up a cigarette. Yes, we were bad kids. I sat with her on a bench while she groaned about the other 2. Suddenly, the air got thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly asked if she felt like we were being watched. She responded with a tiny nod, and then we were blinded. Somebody was in a car in the driveway with their brights on us. My heart was racing as I stood up and pulled Julie out of the spot she seemed to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe this sound other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but I somehow managed to get myself and Julie inside the house. As soon as we got inside, the headlights went off and it was pitch black again. I locked the door and turned off the light. By this time, Julie had regained her composure to tell the other two what had happened, as I frantically checked the back door and turned every light off. I told them to shut up, and they listened by the back door. I heard the car door close, and I remember praying that he would go away. Then right by my cheek, the door handle started to turn slowly, then frantically. I crawled away from the door and moved to where my friends were. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat still as stone and listened to this man bang on every window and door trying to get inside. The man was located across the room right next to 2 windows. I finally got up the courage to run to the phone and I called my mom. I told her that we were all alone and somebody was trying to get inside. I hung up with her and waited. Julie screamed to the man that we called the cops, and all of a sudden the banging stopped. We sat and waited, listening to him get in his car, and then that sound again. The squeal that turned into a growl, and then he was gone. My mom and stepdad showed up and checked the whole place out. They found tire tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway where his car was, proving he had watched us for quite a while. The truly scary part was the scratch marks all over the doors and the windows. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekends at Nikki's house and had a great story for her parents when they got home. Our parents didn't punish us for lying and being reckless. I guess 2 hours of torture at the hands of a madman was enough. We made a report to the police, but the man was never caught. This happened in Antioch, California. It was around 2 a.m. I was at a friend's house, safe in warm, sheltered suburbia. We were having a lot to drink, chit-chatting and enjoying ourselves. Of course, when you're having fun, time hits the fast-forward button and those few minutes turn into an hour. I had too much to drink. My friend has a bit an abrupt bedtime, so I had to dodge out early, still intoxicated. I felt too shameful thinking I'd be asking too much to stay in his house to sleep off the drunkenness. I suppose he was either too rude or too drunk to consider it himself. Whatever. Sometimes a little inconvenience makes you appreciate everything else, right? I needed about an hour or so to sober up and drive back. As fast as time passed during my stay, it decided to drastically slow down as soon as I stepped out of his house. It was a cul-de-sac area, a concrete jungle with the stem of the street light breaking into a fork. Alongside the road, my car was parked. The only street light that worked was in the middle of the cul-de-sac circle, about 80 yards away. I stumbled towards my car, produced my keys, felt the metal lineup, opened my door, and shifted to the back seat. Because this was a dark, strange, and unfamiliar neighborhood, I took the leftover newspapers and a sweater in my back seat to cover myself up. I was a little scared. I wanted to camouflage myself and not be just some guy awkwardly sitting in his car waiting for time to pass in order to drive home. I couldn't fall asleep. The uncomfortable feeling of a cheap backseat bed enshrouded in darkness didn't make the chance of slumber easier. It felt too ominous. And of course, my mind began to wander. I thought of worst-case scenarios. Like how the police would shine their lights on me through the window or a drunk driver hitting my car, and wait. In the distance, about 100 yards away, I could hear footsteps approaching. The gravel scuffed with each step forward, growing in proximity but periodically taking stops. I wondered why until it made sense in my mind. Whoever it was probably looking through cars carefully, with the intent to steal one. I couldn't recall how many cars were on the block, but I counted 3 full stops until he was at my window breathing. I froze. There was no more than 1 foot between us now. The car encapsulated me as I lay hidden beneath backseat clutter, forming myself into an object, trying my hardest to be unnoticeable, unmoving, and simply not there. "I see you," said a 40-plus-year-old man in a perverse baby talk. Imagine when you were playing hide and seek and one of your friends tricks you into coming out. He said it in that tone of voice, as if baiting me, like he was questioning whether the clutter in the back seat was just clutter or a person. I didn't want to move or check the window. I remained cluttered. Give me an Academy Award. My body reacted by minimizing my breathing so much that I felt paralyzed. I dare not look. My eyes fixated on the back of the passenger seat. I didn't blink, I didn't move, and I didn't breathe really. My heart was pounding so hard it shook my body with each throb. He circled around the car. My ears didn't fail me. I heard the steps. I felt like I was part of the car. I could feel him touching the trunk as he carefully pressed down on it, as if to test the alarm or to test me. I was in the middle of fight or flight. I couldn't do either without elevating danger. I was frozen, hoping that he was bluffing. He circled the car again, and the door handle to my right jiggled. He was pulling it multiple times. "I see you." Same tone, but more agitated and stressed. More convinced that he was trying to make that clutter move, revealing it to be of his expectations that it was me. My muscles tensed like a cow before slaughter. Tap, 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 tap. That had to be metal against glass. Take a penny right now and tap your window. A crowbar, a knife, a rock, a gun. My eyes fixated on the seat in front of me, never averting my gaze like he was. I was covered enough to where I couldn't see beyond the seat in front of me. I know I couldn't see him, but I could feel his eyes resting on top of me. "My name is Pokerface. What's your name?" The voice changed in a lower, demented, and serious tone. My mind forced a visual. It wasn't anything human. I already accepted my death. I was ready to be shot in the head, ready to take a life-changing bullet and have multiple knife wounds. Just make this sleep bearable, not excruciating, as you drain me out of life. I wouldn't know how to react. My thoughts grew dimmer. I imagined my friend waking up the next morning after a calm night of safe and sound sleep, only to discover my mutilated, defiled, and bloodied body hanging outside my car door. It was then that I heard nothing but my own heart. What was this person doing now? Just staring at me in the middle of the night? Talking to me, or a messy pile in the back seat? Time froze. The footsteps were being swallowed in the distance. Thankfully, he left. I waited another hour until the sun showed hints of itself. I jumped to my front seat and bolted out of there, wide-eyed and sober enough.